Now, the title of the message is What Should I Believe? Okay? And it comes from the series title, which is, as Justin talked to you about a while ago, Belong, Believe, and Behave. And I love how he put that. That's exactly the order that Jesus put them in. And I know you can't see it from here, but there's a little button right here. And somebody from our church was somewhere this week, and they found this little button, and it has a heart on it. And in the heart, it says, you belong. That is awesome. If there's ever a message I would want to give every single person who walks through the doors of our church building, it would be that message. You belong. This is where you belong. So we start with belonging. And last week, we talked the whole teaching time was about belonging. If you didn't get a chance to hear that, I want to encourage you to pull it up on a podcast. Just go to our website, click on media, click on podcast. There might even be a link there now where you can go look at the video. So if you want to look at the video, you can go do that. But at the very end, I taught us this principle. Belonging is really important because a sense of belonging is what opens the door or enables us to become vulnerable. Not to have to hide who we are, not to have to pretend that we're somebody we're not. The sense of belonging enables me to be vulnerable. And vulnerability opens the door to healing and change. And those are huge. So that's what we talked about last week. Now today, we're going to talk about something that becomes sort of the foundation of healing and change. Because the truth is, if I believe something to be true that's not true, and I order my life around something that doesn't turn out to be true, usually does that end up to be a good experience or bad experience? Usually bad. Yeah, usually it hurts. And what becomes the bedrock foundation for change is actually truth. So if I had to give this sermon a subtitle, it would be this: The Truth About the Truth. Got it? Almost 100 times in his recorded ministry in the Bible, Jesus said this phrase, truly, truly, I say to you. Why would he do that? Because Jesus realized that oftentimes that the truth is not that easy for us to know. And so whenever Jesus said, truly, truly, I say to you, that was his code for call a time out, open your ears. I'm about ready to tell you something that many people will not believe, but I want you to know it's actually the truth. So today we're going to press into the topic of the truth. Now we're going to pick it up in a story that we've been working our way through in this teaching series, and it's the story of Jesus traveling through a portion of Israel called Samaria. That was a place that Jews normally didn't go. And it's noontime, and Jesus has been walking all morning, and it's hot, and it's dusty, and he's tired, and he's hungry, and he's thirsty. And he sits down beside a well, and he's hoping to get a drink of water. And along comes a woman out of the town nearby, and she's a woman who has let's just say she has some morality problems. She's been married 5 times and finally gave up on the idea of marriage and is just living with a guy. And she comes up to the well, and there's this interesting interchange, which you'll find if you go listen to the message from last week, where Jesus tries to engage this woman in a conversation, but she doesn't believe she belongs in the circle of dialogue with Jesus. He's a man, she's a woman. And in that culture, that didn't often mix. Not only that, he's a Jew, she's a Samaritan. And the Jews had nothing to do with the Samaritans. So this poor woman is coming to the well. Now think about this. She's coming to the well not knowing she's about ready to encounter the Son of God. God in human flesh. And this is a woman who has a big secret. You know, I know what that's like. Because I'm a pastor in our town, and when people are not living the way that they think they should be living, when they see me in the grocery store, they actually change aisles. Yes, I've seen that many times. You'll be happy to know that I'm a gracious pastor and I do not go and track them down. I realize that I'm the last person they want to see when they don't want to go where they want to go. But you know something? I've also seen people change aisles when they want to get right, and I'm the first person they want to see. Okay? So this lady has no idea. She's about ready to encounter God in human flesh. And when you've been married 5 times and you're living with a guy you're not married with, you probably don't want to run into God, right? She has no idea that that's who she's running into because she doesn't know God. That's the deal. That's the very one you should run into. And she ended up figuring that out. But in this discourse between Jesus and this woman, he keeps trying to gauge her in a conversation, and she keeps trying to shut the conversation down because somehow she doesn't feel like she belongs. Finally, Jesus breaks through, and she figures out, oh my goodness, I'm standing in the presence of a prophet. And that's where we're going to pick up the story. Sir, the woman said, you must be a prophet. So tell me, why is it that you Jews insist that Jerusalem is the only place of worship, while we Samaritans claim it's here on Mount Gerizim where our ancestors worshipped? And Jesus replied, believe me. Would you just underline that? Believe me. Why do you think he said that? Because what he was about ready to tell her is the truth. There's something interesting about the truth that I need to tell you before we read on. Most of you have one of these. It's a cell phone, and on your cell phone you can bring up a GPS app, correct? Most of us have that. I find GPS fascinatingly interesting because GPS is really an exercise in trust. Am I right? What? Are you kidding me? My wife and I were going to a wedding yesterday in the town of Sonoma. And as we were headed out of town, we assumed we would head east. Pulled it up on the GPS and it says, no, you got to go south out of town and you got to go on Highway 37 down there a little ways, and there's a road that cuts up over the mountain, Stagecoach Road, and it'll cut you back into the road that goes to Sonoma. And right away, we were forced into a decision. Okay? I want you to follow this because you're going to learn something right here. Are we going to believe it or not? If I believe it, I will trust it. If I don't believe it, I won't trust it. So how do you know what you believe? Whatever you trust. You can tell me all day long you believe. I could tell my wife, I could tell anybody else, oh yeah, I love GPS. Oh yeah. But when it said to go south, if I decided to go east, I don't actually love my GPS all that much because I didn't trust. You know what I did? I went south. I decided to believe it. We're down there, cut up over Stagecoach Road, and there was traffic everywhere. But you know what happened when I got on the road that goes to Sonoma? There was no traffic coming through. Yeah. It's interesting because what we're going to talk about today is this concept of trust and what should I believe? What should I trust? So Jesus says to her, believe me, and he's about ready to unveil a brand new truth. Take a look at it. He says, dear woman, the time is coming when it will no longer matter whether you worship the Father on this mountain or in Jerusalem. Jesus is about ready to take the wraps off of what worship of God actually looks like. And it's not in this building or in this temple or that temple. And that's how the world had worshiped forever. Worship was about where you went and the rituals that you went through when you got to that place, whatever that place was. And he's saying to her, here's the real truth about worship of God. Indeed, the time is here now when true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and what? In truth. For the Father is looking for those who will worship him that way. I just want you to write this down in your notes somewhere. Jesus is saying to her, Ma'am, you need to understand that there is a direct connection between God and truth, and between the worship of God and what is actually true. And I don't have time to get into the whole spirit thing. Well, that's a topic for another sermon. But today we're going to press into this idea of the truth, and we're going to learn the truth about the truth. Now, many times Jesus talked about the concept of the truth, and we're going to look at another one of those places this morning. Jesus is on trial for his life. He's standing in front of Pilate, and Pilate has the authority to either condemn him to die on the cross, a horrible death, or Pilate has the authority to actually let him free, and he can walk and go home and be free in his culture. And when he's standing in front of Pilate, here's what Jesus says: I was born and I came into the world to testify to the truth. And furthermore, all who love the truth recognize that what I say is true. If there's a direct connection between God and the truth, and if Jesus is God in human flesh, then we shouldn't be surprised there's a direct connection between what Jesus says and truth, right? That would follow. And Pilate looks at him because Pilate is tired of being lied to, frankly. When you're the judge and you're the governor and you sit in this place and people come and lie right to your face because they don't want to be held accountable for what they've done, and they lie to you, you get tired of being lied to. And when Jesus said, I came to testify to the truth, Pilate looks at him and went, yeah, what is truth? And to some degree, that's the question of the morning. What is actually true? Now, there are three things that we should learn from this. And the first is this. Jesus used the word testify, which is a word we normally use in court. And here's how testifying is used in court. First of all, Jesus recognized that in one way or another, the truth always seems to be on trial. Some new form of deception is always standing up and touting that it is the truth and that you shouldn't believe what is actually true because we have a new truth now. That, my friends, is as old as people are. And Jesus recognized that in one form or another, the truth seems to always be on trial. The second thing is this, that the truth can sometimes be hard to identify. And in fact, in a courtroom, when someone is called to give a testimony and they're called to testify, the idea that's supposed to be happening in the courtroom is that the jury and the judge are actually trying to identify what actually happened, what is true. And Jesus said, I came to help in that process. And in fact, the third thing, I think in some ways is the most impactful, and that is when Jesus said, I came to testify, he is saying to us, truth is so important, it's important enough for Jesus to come to earth. Can I tell you something? If something is important enough for Jesus to leave heaven, how important is it? It's got to be massively important for Jesus to leave heaven. And he said, if you want to know why I came to help people understand what is true. Why would it be that important? On another occasion, here's what Jesus said about the truth. The truth will set you free. There's a direct link between truth and freedom. This morning, we're going to press into that over the next few minutes. Now, in order for the truth to lead us to a place of freedom, Jesus says it's the only path to freedom. We have to actually understand the nature of truth. And can I tell you, there's a lot of misinformation about the truth, which is why Jesus said, hey, I came to tell you the truth about the truth. So let's jump into what is the very nature of truth. And I'm going to write up on this flip chart three different kinds of truth, because there's actually three types of truth in our world, and it's important that we understand not only what they are, but what goes in each category. And I'm going to start with the least impactful in our lives, but it's still true, and it's a kind of truth that we call subjective truth. And there are three things that you should know. Well, first of all, subjective truths are they are personal realities that give shape to our lives. Okay? So many years ago, I was headed across the ocean for the very first time to really head over to Europe and the rest of the world. And Boeing had just come out with their 747 plane. Man, that makes me old as dirt, doesn't it? Right. They had just come out with their 747 plane, and we were headed on a trip from JFK to Amsterdam. Now, the interesting thing was, back in those days, flying was an amazing privilege, and everyone dressed up in suits and dresses, and they gave you real food on the plane. No packages of peanuts or pretzels or some stale sandwich that was made who knows when. They actually brought out fairly extravagant meals. So we're sitting on the plane, they serve us our food, and I'm actually on the plane with a bunch of my friends, including my older brother, who's 15 months older than I am, and we have always been very close. And we're sitting in the same row, but a few seats apart. And so they bring our food to us, and I'm looking at the food, and it looks really good. And so Monica's sitting next to me, and we say a short prayer, and we start to eat our food, and she's watching me eat, and Monica has way more culture than I do, right? And so she's looking, and she realizes that I'm not touching this one dish, and she says to me, "Dear, what do you think that dish is?" And I said, "It looks like chocolate pudding with whipped cream." I'm thinking, I'm not eating that first. I'm saving that to last. She says, "Honey, I hate to disappoint you, but that's actually liver pate with mayonnaise." There's a reason I married that lady. Yes. Now, my older brother is sitting a few seats away, and interestingly enough, his wife does not know what that is, and neither does he. And I don't know it, but he set it aside for dessert, and about 15 minutes later, he looks at me with a funny look on his face and says, "Have you tried that chocolate pudding yet?" And I am laughing at him. Okay, now let's go to that story and learn some things about truth, okay? Subjective truth, these are personal realities that give shape to our lives. And so they are relative. Some of you sitting in this audience absolutely love liver pate and mayonnaise. You're probably the same people who love fruitcake. Oh, another story for another time. I'm so sorry. I'm going to get a whole bunch of people mad at me. Kevin is rubbing off on me. There you go. All right. Yeah. You know, you actually get to decide this. They vary from person to person. One person would say, liver pate is a delicacy. It is awesome. And the other person would go, "Ooh." Yeah. It's relative. It varies from person to person. And the second thing you need to know is that you actually get to decide. There's no governing body that says to you, "I'll tell you what's true about you and liver pate. You like it." Your mother may have tried that with you. But in the end, no, you actually get to make that choice. And the third thing you need to know about subjective truth is that there is enjoyment in it, but there's actually no real freedom in it. You know, whether you like liver pate or you don't, it doesn't actually change the internal workings of who you are. There's no great liberty in that either way. Subjective truth. Now, there's enjoyment in it because the more you learn about yourself and the more choices that you make that are in line with what are your personal likes and dislikes and so forth, well then, yes, you actually add to the enjoyment of your life, but there's no real freedom in that. There's a second form of truth, and that is this, and that's objective truth. And objective truth, these are immutable realities. What does immutable mean? Immutable means not only that it's not going to change, it can't change. It's immutable. It's been set in place, okay? These are immutable realities that govern our world. Let's go back to my brother. As much as he wanted that liver pate and mayonnaise to taste like chocolate pudding and whipped cream, it was in fact liver pate and always would be. That was an immutable reality. It was an objective truth. And no matter how much subjectively he wanted that to be something different, it was not. If you've ever had a 3-year-old child and you bought them a Superman costume, okay? If you weren't aware of the fact that there's an objective reality called gravity, your 3-year-old kid is going to put on the cape, jump up on the back of the couch, and believe that human beings can fly if they have that cape on. But you know, as much as your 3-year-old wants to believe that and subjectively believes that that's a reality, objectively, you know what? There's a painful ending at the end of that, because the truth is the truth. And it doesn't vary from person to person. It is a reality that governs all of us. In the courtroom, we function around a thing called alibis. And we know that if a person was here at the time the crime was committed and the crime was over here, we say they have an alibi and can no longer be a suspect in terms of pulling the trigger. They may have been in collusion with someone who did, but they have an alibi. Because we know in this field right here, two opposing truths cannot both be true. One of them is false. Got it? That's why it's called objective truth. We actually manage this in the most wonderful way. Science is built on objective truths. And the more we learn, for instance, about the truths that govern the human body and in the inner workings of our cell and macrobiology, and the more we learn about how cancer works, and the more we put those two together, we find more and more cancers that we are actually able to treat, because all we are doing is we are managing truths that we didn't make, we just discover them, and we use them and leverage them in ways that lead us to greater places of freedom. Got it? That's objective truth. Now there's a third kind of truth. Well, here, I should give you the rest of this. Objective truth is not relative. Okay? It is the same for everybody. Gravity works for you just like it does for me. Okay? Number two, we don't get to decide what's true for us. It's true for all of us. And number three, there's freedom in this kind of truth. We use it that way all the time. The third kind of truth is this. It's transcendent truth. And transcendent truth these are the immutable realities that govern the spirit world and eternity. These are truths that God put in place, and the thing that you need to know about this is that these are also not relative. You and I didn't get to make them. We don't get to choose what's true for us. They are unchanging realities that govern the spirit world, and they govern eternity. We don't get to decide what is actually true for us. Now, this is where, and I want to pull to the side of the road for just a minute. because I'm going to talk about something that's a very commonly held belief, especially here in Sonoma County and in Marin County, and that is we have this tendency to believe that whatever I choose to believe is true for me. And if this form of religion appeals to me, well, then that becomes my truth. And if this one does, that becomes my truth. And if no religion appeals to me, well, that becomes my truth. We're going to talk about that, and I don't want to talk down about anybody or in any condescending way, but I want to tell you that Jesus would not buy into that for a heartbeat because it's not actually true. We'll look at that in just a minute. But we don't actually get to decide what's true for us up in this category any more than we do in this category. If it's true, it's true. And if it's not true, it's just not true. The third thing is, this is where ultimate freedom is found, because in category number 2, the objective truth, this is where we can find a lot of freedom in our physical world. But this is where we find freedom in our hearts and in our spirits and in our relationships. And this is where we find freedom in eternity. So I said, the impact gets greater the further up the scale we go. And this is the kind of truth that Jesus said, I came to testify to. He didn't give lectures on gravity. He didn't give lectures on the structure of the human cell, although he could. Jesus talked about the things that have to do with life and eternity and relationships. And when he said, truly, truly, I say to you, he was talking in this area. Okay? So there's ultimate freedom in this. Now, one of the interesting things is it's not always easy to know what goes in which category. So I'm going to give you just a tiny example. Let's take morality. Okay? Morality. That's how we interact with each other and what's okay and what's not okay. So is morality here? Is it here? Or is it here? That's a big debate. Okay? So let's start with moral laws. And let's take a law that's on, let's say, the books of every country in the world. And it's in various forms, and it is, don't steal. Okay? So is that here? This law that says don't steal, is it here or is it here? Well, the interesting thing is the human law that says don't steal is here. You know why I know it's here? Because any law that human beings write, they can also change. Things that used to be illegal are now legal, and things that used to be illegal are now legal. And you know, if you live long enough, they'll flip again. Now, maybe not the law that you shouldn't steal, but there's plenty more laws that have to do with human morality that change. But here's what I want you to understand. Human laws that speak to morality are subjective, but morality itself is here. Whether human law agrees with it or not. God decides what's moral and immoral. We don't. That make sense? Yeah. That's the way God ordered the world. And it's good. Frankly, I know. If you took Psychology 101, if you took human behavior, if you took any form of social science, they're going to teach you that morality is decided by human mores and that cultures decide what's right or wrong. No, my friend, cultures do not decide what's right or wrong. Cultures decide who goes to jail and who doesn't. But what's actually right or wrong is up here. Okay? Now, Jesus gave a wonderful illustration of a transcendent truth. I want to read it to you. Here's what he said. I am the way, the truth, and the life. And here's what that means. No one can come to the Father except through me. Jesus didn't buy into and wouldn't for a heartbeat. Just choose your path, whatever truth works for you. Go and believe that's true, and hopefully if you believe it enough, it will be. Jesus said, no, I actually came to testify to the truth so you don't have to be lost and wandering around and trying a bunch of stuff that doesn't end up to be true. I want to tell you the truth. And the truth is, not only can no one come to the Father but by me, are you ready for the corollary? Anyone who wants to come to the Father can come through me. That's the deal. As we close, I want to give us two closing thoughts. First of all, our culture, and by the way, it's not unique to our culture. Almost every culture that's ever lived has tried to take this truth and drag it down here. You know why we try to drag transcendent truth down to subjective truth? It puts us in control. I like being able to decide what's true for me, and what I want to do and what I don't want to do. And that's why Jesus said, no, it's got to stay up here. It's the tendency of all cultures to try to want to make transcendent truth relative so that we get to be in charge. And the second thing is this: we don't actually get to decide what's true for us, but we do get to decide who or what we're going to trust. Remember this? You didn't get to write the software, but you do get to decide whether you trust it or not. I want to say this to you. Would you settle for a GPS system that was right 75% of the time? 1 out of every 4 turns was wrong? Some of you are going, I got one of those. Okay. Get you some new software, right? No. No, if your GPS was wrong 1 out of 4 times, you would throw it away. Listen to me. That's why when it comes to your eternity, you cannot trust your eternity to human philosophy or any form of a human-based religion. Because even if it's right 75% of the time, friend, if you would not drive your car following a GPS that's right only 75% of the time, why would you drive your soul that way? When you could sign up with Jesus and know He's right 100% of the time. That's the deal. So we're going to give you a chance. Every Sunday in our church, people make the decision to follow Christ and become Christians. We're going to give you that chance this morning. And so there's a simple prayer. The prayer doesn't save you, okay? Following Christ, accepting His free gift of eternal life, turning to Him, trusting Him, making Him sort of the GPS of your life. You got it? That's what actually takes you to this wonderful place of freedom, and it carries you into eternity, into the kingdom of Jesus. You start that journey by just telling Him, hey, I want in on that. And I'm going to lead you in a simple prayer to do that. So if you're ready to do that, let's all bow our heads. Here's the simple prayer that you pray. Jesus, today I choose to become your follower. I accept your forgiveness. Thank you for dying to pay the penalty for my sin. Would you lead me and guide me in this life, even as we sang, speak what is true to me. I pray in your name. Amen. Amen.